The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am taking a look back at Arkham Knights 2018 in general and the Ironman event in particular. This episode discusses the Path to Carcosa campaign in a fair amount of detail, so if you haven't played that campaign, what are you waiting for? Go and do it, and then come back and listen to this episode. This year, about 30 players arrived at the Fantasy Flight Games Center at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, prepared to tackle the Path to Carcosa campaign in one long sitting. The motto for this year's event was "Finishing is Winning," and I believe all the teams did finish the campaign in one way or another. Several teams wrapped up the campaign in as little as 10 hours, while a couple finished off, you-know-who, just as FFG staff were sweeping the floors at midnight. Sadly, my team didn't make it to dim Carcosa, going down to defeat in Black Star's Rise. We finished the campaign, we just didn't finish it quite the way we would have liked. Let's just say our voracious appetite for victory points came back to bite us in the ass in the end. Now, before I discuss my team's performance in the Ironman, I had a chance to sit down with another team, the Mythos Busters, to discuss their preparations for the event. So, enjoy.
I am Josh, DeLarp guy on the Discord.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm Unlimited Power on Discord.
I'm Steven, Spectre on Discord.
I'm Jonathan, Doma on the Discord.
So, how did you guys get into the game?
I have been playing all the various Arkham games for probably 15, almost 20 years. So, yeah, this was a logical next step.
So I was not into the Arkham games until about 2 years ago at Gen Con. Ran into demos of the card game and just fell in love with it, and then just exploded into the rest of the universe and just came out for Arkham Knights a few years ago and just loved it.
Started playing FFG LCGs a few years ago. I enjoy co-op games a lot, so as soon as this released, I bought a few cores and got a bunch of people in the store into it as well.
So sorry, go ahead.
I started out as a huge Lovecraftian fan. By that point, I was looking for games that had Lovecraftian elements, and Arkham 2.0 was my intro into board gaming and in general.
So you guys did the Ironman last year as well?
Three of us,
yeah. I was not here this year.
Yeah, our fourth couldn't make it this year, so we recruited a new guy.
So, what is the Ironman like?
Grueling. Last year we approached it like almost a competition, and a lot of jiving back and forth between teams of, who's going to get the most victory points? And
who could finish first or something like that. Yeah.
By the end of the day, we're like, oh god, not next year. We're just going for a good resolution next year.
Our nerves were definitely fried by the end of that one.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the biggest difference between doing Dunwich Legacy and Path to Carcosa will be?
I think that the biggest difference is probably the planning as far as choices. There aren't as many choices in Dunwich Legacy, and most of them don't have as big of an impact. The conviction doubt mechanic, as well as certain other story choices, can make a big impact on Carcosa. So when we approached the planning, that was key on our mind.
So Carcosa feels much more like a sanity attack versus more of a just straight up brawler in Dunwich. A little more.
So have you played Carcosa, all of you, 4-player before? And
yes.
I've not played it 4-player.
I've done 4.
I've done 3.
So do you have a favorite, least favorite scenario?
I definitely, as brutal as it can be sometimes, I love Last King.
I like Oath. For as much as everyone hates on Oath, it's just
my second favorite.
It works really well for me most of the time.
I like Curtain Call. I think it's kind of fun. You get to go around talking to people and
that's actually my least favorite.
That's the dinner party. Carcosa first one.
Yeah. Oh wait,
Card's the first one.
which is the second one?
That's Last King.
Last
That's the
King.
one.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Got the name mixed up. Yeah, Last King's my favorite as well. I like that one a lot.
Our brains are fried already.
I think my favorite was probably the Carcosa. I have a bone to pick. The version we're going for, I have a grudge against. We have unfinished business.
So what have you guys been doing to prepare?
Well, we've been working together on Discord, building decks, but also we have every choice that could come up mapped out as to what our response will be. We have planned out how much doubt and conviction we'll have at each step, so that way we can face the right things at the right time for our group. Also thinking about, oh, well, this version takes approximately this much time, and since time is a factor, let's go with the shorter one.
So are you guys going the doubt or conviction route?
We're actually mixing it. We are starting off on doubt and getting through Phantom, and as soon as Phantom happens, we switch over to conviction, because Phantom is significantly shorter on doubt, but Dim Carcosa tends to be a little quicker on conviction.
So who are you guys playing and why?
So I'm playing Marie because several people, him included, are sick and tired of me extolling the virtues of Marie, and he wanted to see her in action. So
I'm playing Rex because I like all the clues.
I'm playing Mark. Guardians of Rogues, two of my favorite. Mark kills things better than anybody.
kills things dead.
I'm playing Finn because I like investigators that can pretty much handle themselves, and Carcosa really does favor evade more than most.
So we've got the 2 flex, we've got the killer, and we've got the cleaver.
So do you have a plan to get everybody out of Oath alive, or is it going to be every man for himself if shit hits the fan?
I'm out of here.
Mostly the second option.
You're on your own.
Ideally, I mean, we're going to be helping each other, but if it gets down to the wire, I am not afraid to astral travel my way out. He's not afraid to I'm out of here.
Running elusive.
We're elusive.
We're definitely shooting for the resolution more than keeping everybody alive.
Yeah. We all have backup decks prepared, so...
The asylum's the tricky part.
Yep. If it happens, if things go wrong, as long as we get the resolution we want, we're willing to sacrifice our character.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have a pick for worst enemy and treachery in the campaign? Is there anything you're really worried about?
Roaches are always terrible.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Or the corrosion.
If things go wrong, Straight Jacket can be bad. We have plans for Straight Jacket.
Mike has experience with the Straight
I took a gym to the asylum and he got straight jacket and never left before.
I had a Jenny get Straight Jacket first turn, kept it on the entire time, never once left it. And she made it out.
It didn't happen.
I'm not necessarily worried about too much of anything. Just the never-ending wheel test on Finn is going to be really fun for me.
King and I have a rendezvous.
So do you? So it is a very long, grueling process to do 8 scenarios in a row. Do you think there's one in particular that's going to be your breaking point that you're going to have to get over?
If we get through the asylum, fine. I think we're fine.
I think just for the sheer mental impact, Black Stars is going to be tough on us. Just because there's a lot of thought involved in that. It's later on. We're going to be tired. It'll be tough.
I think we'll show signs of weakness starting at Phantom now.
Yeah.
Because even on Doubt, that one's pretty long.
Yep.
So so you've the motto this year is finishing is winning. Is that is it just finishing that's important, or are you hoping to take down who at the end as well?
Finishing with a good resolution, obviously, but if we as players survive this ordeal, I'll be happy.
So,
Agreed.
So what do you think finishing will hinge on?
Honestly, I think a big part of it is going to be starting at Phantom. We're going to feel really worn out, and we're going to be making suboptimal plays and just keeping an eye on each other. And I think we're going to be tired of each other at the end, saying, no, you should do this instead. I think that will kind of wear us down, but as long as we stay on each other's heels, I think we'll be fine.
So what odds do you give yourselves of finishing this with your sanity intact?
Our players' sanity intact, not so much. Characters, I think we stand a pretty decent chance.
I agree.
Except for maybe this guy. Mark doesn't really have much to play with to begin with.
Yeah. If we lose anybody on Dim, it might be him.
So you have you really want to take down H here?
Yeah, I lost to this one. The one we're shooting for. I had an amazing story experience, but I'm bitter that I did not beat him earlier, and that's the resolution I have again.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be rooting for you. Is there anything else you guys would like to add?
Join us next year. We want to see all of you guys out here this year. I'm organizing a lot of the paperwork side of things. We've got 2 shirts. We have 28 participants this year. We're shooting for 40 next year.
Do you guys have a team name?
No.
Do you want to keep the last one, last year's?
Yes.
The Mythos Busters Busters.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. My team, the best Ironman, consisted of Discord's rules guru BD Flory, Casey, aka Mr. Trench, and Brandon, the host of the Optimal Play channel on YouTube. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I suggest you do so. He's got some great Arkham horror content over on his channel. Now, BD Flory was piloting a Daisy Walker build designed to abuse the archaic glyphs guiding stones. That's, of course, the guiding stones that lets you discover extra clues if you succeed by... the more you succeed by, the more clues you can gather. While Casey opted for Akachi, competing with BD Flory to see who could play the most Delve Too Deeps during the campaign, Brandon decided that he was going to take Mark for a spin for the first time, wielding a 32 Colt with custom ammunition in one hand and a time-worn brand in the other. I decided that I was going to play Finn Edwards on the day. Now, Finn may seem like a bad choice for the Path to Carcosa campaign due to his abysmal willpower, but I had played him through the first 3 scenarios solo, and I was very impressed by his versatility. He can discover clues, fight or evade as need be. Now, Finn may only have a willpower of 1, but he's in a much better position to weather the horror that comes with this campaign than an investigator such as Skids O'Toole, because Finn can take cards such as Logical Reasoning and Peter Sylvester to shore up his sanity. Here's a look at the level 0 version of the deck that I piloted on the day. It's based on a design by Starts With A Name over on Arkham DB. The deck has Flashlight to help discover clues until Finn can purchase lockpicks. Lone Wolf and Emergency Cash provide resources, while Backstab and Sneak Attack give Finn a way to chip in with a few damage, as well as with his trusty 38. Peter Sylvester and Logical Reasoning, and You Handle This One, are there to protect Finn's sanity. Fine Clothes is there for the poltergeists in Curtain Call and the parlay actions in The Last King. Probably the most difficult decision I had while building the deck was trying to decide whether to run 1 copy of Logical Reasoning or 2, and ultimately I decided 2 was better, just because Finn needs to be a little bit more independent if he's going to get those Lone Wolf bonuses, and so he can't be hanging around Daisy all that much to get the healing from her. So better to have 2 copies of Logical Reasoning to deal with any sanity issues than relying on someone else. And that's a very rogue thing. And my weakness on the day was Mob Enforcer, which I thought was very thematic. It's not a particularly difficult weakness to deal with, and it really didn't give me too much trouble on the day. Now, all of us had planned our upgrades well in advance of Arkham Knights. Here's a look at the deck going into Black Star's Rise. We had a whopping 39 experience points to play with, so Finn could take all of the cool toys. My goal was to pick up adaptable streetwise pickpocketing level 2 and lockpicks early, followed by the Key of Ys. Then I picked up 1 copy of Charisma and 2 copies of Lola Santiago. Finally, I purchased 2 copies of Sure Gamble and 2 copies of High Roller. Now, in hindsight, I think I would have been better off with 2 copies of Hot Streak level 3 or Payday, because it can be quite expensive to run Streetwise and Lola Santiago in tandem, especially if you can't rely on your Lone Wolf bonuses, because the investigators get bunched up at certain locations. Now, the campaign went relatively smoothly, with the exception of Black Star's Rise. I was a little worried that I had picked the wrong investigator when Finn got tagged for 3 horror right out of the gate by a Rotting Remains. That was the first encounter card that I drew on the first Mythos Phase. And if you've played Curtain Call, you know that 3 horror is a very bad place to be, because it makes pulling a skull, of which there are 3 in the Chaos bag, a lot more painful. Fortunately, I drew a logical reasoning and was able to stabilize. I dropped Peter Sylvester on the table a few turns later to make certain Finn wouldn't go insane. Now, we drew a City of Flame for Act 2B, which was fine by me, given Finn's agility of 5, with Peter on the table. We finished off the scenario with by playing several copies of Delve Too Deep, earning a total of 9 victory points for that scenario, getting off to a flying start and being able to afford quite a few of the first upgrades that I wanted for the deck. Now, Finn suffered his one and only setback of the campaign during the Last King. We managed to interview all 5 guests, and Finn chipped in by interviewing Jordan, who's the one who requires you to have 10 resources before you can parlay with him. Unfortunately, I drew 3 copies of Marked by the Sign while the Man in the Pallid Mask was on the table. I did have you handle this one in my hand. However, you can't play it in response to Marked by the Sign, since that treachery does have peril. Now, there are very few investigators who can take 6 direct horror to the face and live to tell the tale, so I didn't feel too bad about taking a mental trauma in The Last King. I was a little more concerned about the second mental trauma I was going to take before a Phantom of Truth, because we did decide to burn down the house at the end of Last King, so we could avoid dealing with all those boss enemies in subsequent scenarios. Now, Echoes of the Past is one of the easier scenarios in the Path to Carcosa, and our team made short work of it. Daisy had Archaic Glyphs Guiding Stones online at this point, so she was discovering clues en masse. In fact, she was doing such a good job at discovering clues that the rest of us really didn't need to pick up that many. Akachi and Mark busied themselves by playing whack-a-mole with the cultists, while I headed up to the 3rd floor to discover a few stray clues and deal with the Wizard of the Order. Now, at the end of the scenario, Daisy and Finn teamed up to play Double or Nothing on an Archaic Glyphs in the Hidden Library to scoop up most, if not all, of the clues in one action. That was certainly a highlight of the day. The group had been pretty greedy when it came to collecting victory points during the campaign to that point, but we decided to take a pass on the Possessed Oath Speaker. Dealing 20 damage to an enemy is a lot to ask of investigators that late in the scenario, so we were content to play a couple of more Delve Too Deeps for the VPs instead. So we were doing quite well going into Unspeakable Oath. Now, there are few scenarios that invoke as much fear as the Unspeakable Oath, since it can be a one-way ticket to a new investigator. As you are well aware, The Unspeakable Oath is the first barrier in the campaign, and if you don't clear it, you don't get to go on. So everybody was quite focused on passing this particular scenario. This scenario is when Finn really got to shine. I got to play the Key of Ys early, which protected me from most of the horror-inducing treacheries. Finn and Daisy teamed up for another Double or Nothing Archaic Glyphs combo to clear the mess hall in one fell swoop before heading to the basement. We quickly discovered where Daniel Chesterfield was hiding, and the key made it easy for Finn to kill him with a combination of sneak attack and fight actions, rather than waiting around for Mark to make his way down to the basement to handle it for us. Now, it's at this point that our greed nearly got the better of us. We had placed all the monster enemies beneath the act deck, so the Elder Thing token was an auto-fail at this point. And I don't know what it was about that particular token, but it seemed like we drew that token a dozen times between us toward the end of this scenario. It was really quite remarkable. I don't think we saw the auto-fail maybe once or twice, but the Elder Thing, man oh man. We were pulling that thing out of the chaos bag every second pull, it seemed like. Nevertheless, we decided to go fishing for more victory points. We had, all of us had reached the garden and were ready to resign, but we realized that the Beast of Aldebaran and the 2 Screeching Bayaki were still in the encounter deck, so we decided to stick around until we could kill them. Unfortunately, there are other enemies in the deck that complicated our escape, since you can't resign at the garden if there is a ready enemy there. Throw in several of the aforementioned Elder Thing tokens, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Finn busied himself tanking many of the enemies while the other players resigned. So we reached the point where everyone had resigned but Finn, who had to make had to pass 3 evade checks and resign on one turn. And of course, I believe I drew an Elder Thing during that on that turn, so I was unable to resign. Fortunately, we took care of one of the enemies, so the following turn I had to evade 2 enemies and then resign, and one of those enemies was the Beast of Aldebaran, which happened to be the last card in the encounter deck, which was probably why we ended up getting in so much trouble. And I cannot describe the relief I felt when I pulled that final token out of the bag, and it wasn't one of those damned Elder Thing tokens. Finn did make it out of the scenario by the skin of his teeth, and I was relieved that all of those experience points that I had earned in the first 3 scenarios wouldn't go to waste. We did have backup investigators chosen in case we didn't make it out of the Unspeakable Oath, but I wasn't really looking forward to starting Wendy with very few experience points to her name. Now, before we started the campaign, we had decided as a group that we were going to go the doubt route, due in large part to a Phantom of Truth. I played Phantom of Truth twice in conviction mode four-handed, and it was such a miserable experience that I swore I would never do it again. Really, it's one of the lowlights of all the Arkham horror I played, was playing Phantom on conviction four-handed. Between Spires of Carcosa and Twin Suns, the game dragged on for an eternity, to the point where I was basically just begging to take the mental trauma and move on. If you go the doubt route, you simply need to trap and defeat the Organist, which isn't that difficult with 4 players. During the scenario, Mark barely moved from the Gardens of Luxembourg all game, as he killed one Bayaki after another. It just seemed like an endless stream of Bayaki were hitting him, so he was busy with his shooting them out of the sky with his 32 Colt and hacking them to bits with his time-worn brand. Finn and Daisy pulled off another Archaic Glyphs Double or Nothing combo at the cemetery, I believe, and that gave us more than enough clues to defeat the Organist. Despite pulling off the combo for the 3rd scenario in a row, this wasn't a particularly good scenario for Finn. I did get tagged by Frozen in Fear midway through the scenario and couldn't draw logical reasoning to save my life. Fortunately, Daisy and Akachi and Mark were able to trap and defeat the organist before we got into any more trouble. The Pallid Mask also turned out to be a rather straightforward scenario. It didn't take long for us to find the Tomb of Shadows and spend the requisite number of clues to advance. Akachi tanked the Spectre of Death while Mark whittled away at its massive health pool, eventually taking it down. I don't think Akachi did any damage to it. It was all Mark all the way. The pit below did force us to do a little more dancing around the locations than we would have liked. And it ended up that Daisy and Akachi were nearly defeated. However, we were able to make a fighting retreat to the blocked passage, and resign before the enemies got too much to handle. Now, it was about 8 p.m. when we started Black Star's Rise. At this point, we'd been playing for about 10 hours with short breaks to grab food, a drink, or go to the bathroom. The campaign was starting to take a toll on our sanity, and I think it really showed in this game. The first sign of trouble is when Mark got cut off from the group by a pair of spawn of holly that appeared at the broken step. Daisy had done an admirable job of propping up Mark's sanity throughout the campaign, and when Daisy was unable to do that when they got separated, Mark struggled with sanity, and he ultimately went down to defeat. We figured out that the victory path lay at the path above. However, our greed got the better of us here. Bound and determined to grab the VPs at the Chapel of Saint Aubert before making our escape, we were a little too slow reaching the Abbey Tower. Mark's absence was really keenly felt at this point as the number of enemies mounted, and Daisy and Akachi and Finn were having a difficult time dealing with them. We were set up to tackle the Abbey Tower when an Ancient Evils surged into an Ancient Evils, bringing the campaign to an abrupt halt. Now, we realized later that we'd forgotten to remove a Doom from play with Ashley Clark's ability. That's the you get to remove that Doom if you do interview her during The Last King. But I'm not sure it would have mattered. Daisy's archaic glyphs were out of charges, and I didn't have the resources to power Lola Santiago and evade the Beast of Aldebaran, which was sitting on the Abbey Tower. So discovering the final 5 or 6 clues on the tower was going to take at least 2 turns, and I think that was going to be 1 turn too many, unfortunately. Now, after the game, we did get to pose for a picture with Ancient Evils and the true villain of the Path to Carcosa campaign, that being designer Matt Newman, who was more than happy to sign a couple copies of our Ancient Evils for us. You bit us this year, Matt, but we'll be back. We'll be back next year to try our hand at the Forgotten Age. Now, despite going down to defeat in Black Star's Rise, I had a great time playing in the Ironman. The campaign wasn't quite as exhausting as I'd feared, and maybe I chalk that up because I have played. I've played several of the CCGs that have 2 or 3 hour games and long tournaments, so I was sort of used to playing for long stretches at a time, and I thought we worked really well as a team together. We were able to pull off those combos and really make discovering clues that much easier. I did have a chance to sit down with my team for a brief interview after the Ironman and get their thoughts on the day. So I hope you enjoy this. All right, so I'm here with the best Ironman team, even though we placed
The best?
the best in VPs for sure. So just overall impressions of Ironman this year.
It was good. I mean, I didn't do it last year, but it was good times. Exhausting.
Yeah, it seems like it shouldn't take that much out of you, but it does, because you just have to be on for so long, paying attention to everything.
Yeah. And by the end you make bad decisions, chasing victory points.
Arkham's a pretty heavy game, so a solid 12 hours of it is what we just played.
Yeah, 12 hours.
And that was only 7 scenarios.
Yeah. Actually, just introduce yourselves as well before I forget.
I'm BD Flurry on the Discord. I go by that.
Casey, Mr. Trench on the Discord.
And I'm Brandon. I go by Brandon on the Mythos Discord.
So, things went pretty smoothly until I think my heart attack moment was in Oath when I had to double evade and resign to get out.
True. I think that can be laid also at the feet of myself and my Coke and Spirit or Mr. Trey.
Yeah. I like to play Dove. Too deep, what can I say?
that was the first time it got really hairy in the campaign.
Well,
it was all self-inflicted.
Yeah.
So any other highlights of the day?
I got my blind clue in action Daisy thing on. It's all worth it. All of you guys.
Oh, just watching that little combo, the double.
Yeah, double or nothing archaic glyphs.
On the glyphs. Yeah, just watch the whole location, random clues. Oh, okay, I guess they got that handled.
I could have 18, but there weren't 18 clues.
I think my proudest moment was, what's the boss in the Catacombs?
Oh, the Spirit of Death.
Yes, the Spirit of Death. Taking down the Spirit of Death as Merc. I did, I think, all 20 damage to it. Not all in one action or even turn. But, I can do...
I don't think I was just...
Yeah, you helped. You both helped. Encyclopedia.
Thanks.
Generous invasion. But, Mark.
So had you played Mark before?
I had not played Mark before, no. He was a lot of fun. He was extremely focused, and especially because for a 4-player game, I built a very streamlined deck for killing things, and I probably killed, I don't know, I must have averaged a double-digit number of enemies per game. Probably.
Well, at least that Bayaki per game.
And buzzsawing Bayakis.
Yeah. In which scenario was that I moved once in like the first 8 rounds because I was just Byakis are swarming me.
Phantom of Truth.
Phantom of Truth. It's all very together.
Stuck on the starting space, just monster after monster.
Yeah, literally just punching Byakis out of the air or shooting them, as the case may be.
And so you play Mystic a lot.
It's definitely my favorite class. This past campaign, or going through Forgotten Age, was the first time I think that I've done someone with no Mystic Splash, because I wanted to see Leo and Ursula. It seemed like that was kind of how they wanted it to be approached. But Apache is kind of similar to Agnes in a sense, in that you are very reliant on one thing, and you just want to make sure that you've got stuff to do with it. I don't know. The nuances of getting your assets out and which is the best spell or charge asset at the time. Maybe I had not optimized my thinking to that necessarily. I had not played her a lot before. I don't know. Her card pool is pretty limited, so you just kind of take the best thing with charges on it each time. Each time you're looking to upgrade.
Very good cards.
Yeah.
Any game where you
it's a good problem to have in one sense, but also it can sometimes feel one-dimensional in, I don't have something that uses willpower, I will take resources this turn.
Yeah.
And you played Daisy to perfection. I think there was the one turn where you drew a tentacle.
I play the game a lot, but and I play all the investigators a lot, but I don't often play on standard, so I wanted to play a deck that I could never ever
usually not easy.
Easy is the way to go. I want to play a deck that I could never make work on higher difficulty, where retrieval draws are much more inconsistent. So I went with like the full archaic glyphs, Daisy, multi-clue, madness. And I think the best I did without the double or nothing was on that last Black Star Rise location. But then we died because of it. So.
Yeah, if only you had done that on a location where we needed to, win the scenario, not the one with the victory points.
It had 2 victory points though. How could you blame it?
Yeah, 2 victory points.
I
points
was even
for
willing to pass up.
carrying on the campaign. It's a difficult equation to balance. I
2 victory
understand.
points are going to Joe Sensors for drinks.
Yeah.
No, and going to Joe Sensors.
Yeah. You're right. So yeah, really, the victory points is immeasurable.
So I think we ended up with 43
Something
if
like that.
we include Black Star's Rise.
Counting the ones on the scenario where we lost.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not actually sure we get credit for this.
We'd have to go to the guide. Yeah.
Well, I think we get those if we wanted to play Dim with our backup investigators.
Well, no, the campaign's over.
We lost the campaign.
Oh, we lost. Yeah. So
It's not that we went insane or anything.
oh yeah, we lost.
We also went insane.
Well, yeah.
So it was double ancient evils for the loss.
Oh, God. Surging.
Surging.
Yeah, so that one card gave us 5 or 6 extra ones because of that effect.
Galloping
Yeah,
Eagles.
go back to there. How's that?
Yeah. And as game designer Matt Newman stood over us,
Yeah.
he walked up and the ancient evils flowed.
So maybe the Forgotten Age next year. Maybe the Circle Undone.
Yeah.
I think that's a tough ask for a one-day experience all Forgotten Age.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
Replays.
You got replays, you got people getting killed, people taking lots of trauma.
I forgot about the replays. My guess is we'll play Forgotten Age, but we'll house rule the replays. But we'll see. I guess.
I'm not sure how you would house rule. I mean, the first one you can say, well, no, we're not going back into the temple no matter what.
Yeah.
That's easy, but then there's the one where you gotta have all the pillar tokens and you just hold it.
Yeah, Heart of the Elders could be.
You could do something like come in with some XP and you can spend 1 XP each for the pillar after one good faith attempt at the scenario or something.
Based on the Gen Con meetup, maybe we could not the whole thing, but like a part of the scenario, we carry that over much like they do.
True.
Here they say, hey, this is the setup you guys are going into with. I don't know.
We'll
There have been
just
ideas.
call it Aluminum Man.
Yeah.
But maybe it'll be some fun.
Putty Man.
So I had a lot of fun. For one,
It was a great time.
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you all. It was a great time.
The beauty of Arkham, right, is it's the kind of game where if you don't enjoy losing, you're probably not playing it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. So, any final thoughts?
Nerf Ancient Evils. Yeah. That's it. That's all I can think of.
Nerf Ancient Evils and screw Byakis.
That's right.
Victory points are the only real victory.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's in the name.
Yeah, we got a moral victory.
And come to Arkham Nights. They had a few extra tickets this year. Yeah, 2019.
All
If you're
right.
watching this, see you next year. We'll Iron Man it up.
And watch Optimal Play.
That's right.
Optimal Play. YouTube.com/some gibberish because I don't have a custom URL yet. Search for us.
Google will tell you all about it.
All right. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for my coverage of the Ironman event at Arkham Nights 2018. Before I wrap this episode up, I'd like to thank Josh for organizing the event, as well as the other members of the Mythos Busters for agreeing to appear on camera. Finally, a big thank you to the members of my team, BD, Flory, Casey, and Brandon, for a memorable day of Arkham Horror LCG. You are terrific players, one and all, and the best Iron Man on the day. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.